But hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Harris with Business Connect, and today is somewhat of a continuation of the Technology and Innovation Showcase. We really wanted to get a closer look specifically at household water treatment and safe storage, or HWTS. And we wanted to hear from boots on the ground. We wanted to hear from researchers. We wanted to hear from industry and get a larger glance at specifically household water treatment and how we can further that and how we can make the most impact with that. So today I'll be moderating. I'll be asking a few questions of our panelists who I'll introduce, but I also really would love audience engagement. This is a time for us to get not only feedback from the audience, but comments, questions, concerns, debate. We accept it all, we want it all. And people will probably amble in from lunch as they have been the past 3 days with the tech showcase. So please interrupt with a question. You can either stand at a mic to let us know that you have a question or just raise your hand, and then we have people who will travel with the mics to you. So I will introduce our guest today. We first have Nikki Beach. She is a WHO consultant and has had over 27 years of experience in public health. So we're very excited to have Nikki on the panel. We have Jeremy Lambert, the CEO of Business Connect. We have Tom O'Mahony. I'm going in this direction. We have Tom O'Mahony, the R&D manager at Kersia, which, if you didn't know, Kersia manufactures the AquaTab, which I'm sure Tom will talk a lot more about. And then we have Jeffrey Ryle. He is the director of Good Justice, a nonprofit that does work in Honduras, Malawi, and I think even locally too, as of late. And then we have Camille Zimmer, who is the Research and Knowledge Advisor with the Center for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technology, or better known as CAWST. And yeah, I'm really excited to have all of them. They all have unique backgrounds, and I'm going to go sit down so that we can get this chat started. Hello, everyone. So again, thank you for being here. I wanted to get us started off with just an easy question so that we can get to know all of your backgrounds and where you're coming from with HWTS. So we can start maybe just this side and go down the line of, can you tell me a little bit more about your experience with household water treatment and your background in that, how you got to where you are today?
Live.
Yeah.
It is. Hi, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to be here. I'm excited. I've been working in the household water treatment space for about 27 years, like Jamie mentioned. All of that time, I was with a company, a standards writing organization that also certifies, NSF International, and so I was active with protocol development for that, as well as managing some of the certification in the laboratory. So all of my experience pretty much is in the laboratory, so that's what I'll be able to share, I guess, today. So while with that organization, I also did a lot of work, I think starting about 2003 with the US DoD and other NATO nation militaries around writing programs to help them evaluate solutions that they're finding for military environments when they're in forward operations. And I think I probably know most of you from the time that I spent since, I think, 2011, started with WHO helping to, develop and then continue the ongoing, maintenance of the WHO's international scheme to evaluate household water treatment technologies. Mostly I had a technical role in that with the protocols and the laboratory evaluations, some of that oversight, but also now supporting some of the efforts that they're engaged in, which is around regulatory and in-country technical capacity strengthening to do some of those evaluations in country. So thank you.
Thanks.
See, I'm new in this sector, so I'll say I'm Jeremy Lambert, CEO. It's only been a decade for me in this sector, so I consider myself still a newbie. I really come from the place of the business side, as we're within Business Connect for 15 years doing D2C, B2B in this HWTS space. but then supplying NGOs, government work as well, but really come from that D2C, B2B business development for those technologies.
So my background, I spent the last 24 years working in developing nations. And in those 24 years, of course, you can't help but see that water is the source of life, right? Like it can be super destructive, as we've seen here in Western North Carolina, but it can also give life. And so my background is that we work all over Honduras. We work in about 47 different communities, and we work in Malawi. And then we have partnerships in other countries as well. And it's we're working literally with communities, with families, with moms, right, that are like, I want my kids to be healthy. I want my kids to go to school. And so working with them and saying, what does that look like? And the biggest thing that we have found is when they have access to clean water, all of the other things come.
Hi, and thanks, Jamie, for the introduction. Thank you for having me. So I'm Camille, and I joined CAWST about 6 months ago. Before that, I finished my PhD a year ago at the University of Victoria in Canada, looking at household water treatment technologies and how to evaluate them in the field rather than in the lab. So looking at how well they're operating in the hands of the end user. And my current role at CAWST, so we support our clients to implement their projects. We do training and capacity building. So what I'm doing is more on the consulting support side, so giving technical advice to clients who are implementing household water treatment projects. And also, as part of my role and because of my background in research, I am responsible for the small handful of projects where we support our clients to do their own practical research to improve their household water treatment approaches. So I'm responsible for that as well.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm Tom O'Mahony. I'm here representing Aquatabs. So thank you, Jamie, for inviting us to come and join the conversation today. So I'm in the HWTS space with Aquatabs for the last 4 years. So I joined Medentech, or Kersia at the time. I did my PhD in Trinity College Dublin in Ireland. And so what brought me to Medentech and to the Aquatabs was the story around exactly what Jeff has just said about the impacts that it makes. And hearing those stories of actually the product and Aquatabs and all of what it does on the ground to help and support families. So that's what drives me, and that's what drove us. So my role, I guess, with Kersia now is in the R&D is the development of new products, new services, and the continuous improvement of our existing products. And also a huge part, as many of you may know, is the technical support that we provide to our customers and the end users. So that's around helping understand how best the product should be used, instructions, the efficacy, and everything that goes with the current products that we have and the future potential products. So that's my space.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. And I'll actually direct this first question at you because as most of us, at least on the panel, know how important HWTS is to preventing waterborne disease, but I think that the issue that we've seen a lot of the times is access to those life-saving solutions. So what are some innovative ways that we can increase access to household water treatment in rural areas, areas where they don't just have that readily available in the market right now? So there's loads, and for me, coming from the R&D space, innovation is not just about the technical advancements. It's actually the whole systematic approach to innovation. So that's, as we've been hearing all week, is about the financing for us and for others, I've no doubt. It's about how to select the correct projects. There's so many projects that are completely worthy, and every one of them needs to be implemented. But actually choosing those and choosing the right ones to get to the end point that everyone and the people that it's affecting are having the benefits of that. There's loads of others, like we've heard in the breakout sessions, about collaborations and partnerships are
really, really important, and how we innovate and set those up. For again, in my role is really, really important. It's finding those the best partners that can help us get AquaTabs to the people that need it, and allow us then as scientists to track that, to make sure that the water quality is right, and look at the other aspects outside of that. And so, like, there's loads more, and even to come back then to the innovation of the actual technical side of it. So, like, this week we're hearing about AquaTabs being used in East Africa, and like wondering how to get it on the ground at certain times. The product isn't getting to the people. So again, that's something we have to go back and think as a business, how can we manage the distribution? How can we understand and innovate ways of getting the product to where it needs to? And we hear it too, I know not specifically for HWTS, but even in disaster relief and so on, it's the same challenge. There's the environmental innovations, the sustainability innovations. So there's the whole approach to that. So it's not just, for me, it's not just about what we can do as a technologically advancing AquaTabs or any other product in the space of HWTS. So that's what I would say. And I think that's really important, that whole holistic view of everything that we can all do, because it's so important that, like, we can't just tackle one problem. There's so many little things, and if everyone and we can all challenge and do a little bit of innovation on each part, I think we'll get to where we need to go for all of what we're talking this week about.
Yeah, that I completely agree, because it starts with creating the product and innovating it, and there definitely needs to be the consideration of the end user in that, but there needs to be a lot of players in the space to get it from the lab to wherever it's going. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to open, this is more of an informal chat, so I'm just going to open this up to the panel members. Yeah, Jeremy, I see you're wanting to bite.
Yeah, I was going to actually, the holistic piece of that, I think that's part of HWTS, is this holistic approach that says, from innovation of a manufacturer to training and empowerment of implementers to distributors on the ground, and creating a pricing structure so there's sustainability and profit for those that bring it to the last mile, and to building systems within HWTS works within these larger systems too, as there's this move to really bring piped and have it be a part of the holistic picture. So I appreciate that work, because I think that is part of it, is HWTS has a piece in the whole, the holistic of it, and even within HWTS there's so many different actors that really have to be crucial players to it to be profitable, so somebody on the ground wants to, and that's our piece. There has to be somebody on the ground that has the product in a small store or anywhere else that makes a small profit from it, to the innovation side, to the training side, to the implementation side. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, Camille.
Yeah, to build on what Jeremy just said, so I forgot to add at the beginning when I introduced myself, but I'm still fairly new to CAWST, but CAWST as an organization has over 20 years of innovation in non-networked solutions. And so my perspectives aren't just mine, they're CAWST and from our implementers and from our clients. So for us, it's speaking of taking HWTS technologies and really supporting that implementation. So for us, like, to reach rural communities and those difficult to access areas, it's so much about capacity building and training and things like that, and that's where we focus. So that's how we see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The training, I think we've heard a lot here. Training, maintenance, operation, that's huge for having success from start to finish. Yeah, I agree. Do you have any other thoughts here before? Yeah.
So it all starts with you, right? And then it gets to people like us. And I just want to say, first of all, that how great is it that there are so many different solutions, right? So I very much appreciate what you have said, that you're here to represent AquaTabs, but oh my God, there's so many great things out there to be able to use. So for us, and you just kind of mentioned this, by the time it gets to us, right, we've got this great product or products that we're out there utilizing, but then how do you follow up on that? How do you make sure that the end user, the mom, the family, the school is using it properly? And so I think that's really key in this HWTS conversation, is the follow-up to it, to make sure that whatever the solution that's being used is being used properly and to its full effect. And so I know we're probably going to take a little bit of time to talk about that even here in a few minutes, but that's really, really key to all of this. We can have great products, but if we're not following up on with an intentional plan, then we're not living out the full potential of the actual solution.
Yeah, 100% agree. And that falls on the manufacturer as far as labeling and wording and the visuals that come with it, but then it also falls on who is being trained to implement this too, and who is the person responsible for training them, and it is a lot of actors in the space, so yeah, I agree.
Can I just add one thing?
For sure.
I didn't think I would have anything to contribute to this question because I'm coming from the lab, but hearing what you guys said, I just want to mention, the labeling and that kind of stuff is very important. As we started doing these evaluations under the WHO scheme, literature and labeling became very interesting, right? So the laboratories would get these and all they would have is the product literature that came along, and sometimes it wasn't clear, and so that was some of the support that was useful, I think, from the scheme, was this idea of how to use them. And it might be something as simple as it doesn't say, to stir, for example. It might have seemed intuitive, but just simple things like that for it to be properly used.
Yeah, completely agree. And I would love to hear from audience members too. At any point, raise your hand, interrupt. We would love your comments and questions too. So just a reminder. Great. My next point that I wanted all of us to touch on, because we can all touch on this in some sort of ways, is to talk about examples of failed projects or initiatives, because I think that's really, really important to talk about what has not worked so that we do not repeat it going forward. So I would love to hear from all of you about a failed project or initiative, the lessons that were learned, and what could be applied to any future projects down the line. We can, let's start. Let's
go with the boots on. Let's go with the boots on the ground guy.
Yeah.
Right. So failure is only failure if you don't learn from it. Let's start there. Okay.
That's true. Yeah.
So we started out with a certain system that, in certain contexts, is a good water solution. But in our context, we were anticipating that this water solution would last 2 years, and we started finding out it only lasted 10 months. So not necessarily a failure, but we had to pivot pretty quickly, a lot quicker than what we had anticipated, and we went ahead and did that. But I would say a failure that we had was when we started to implement home by home. We would do those homes over there in that community, and then a few homes over there in that community, and then a few, and we truly didn't know who had what. Yeah. We weren't mapping anything. We weren't using any type of GIS. We weren't doing any follow-up, and it was very, very confusing. And so there again, not necessarily a failure because we pivoted and started GIS mapping everything, and it's been really, really great. But it's I say that if you're not pivoting fairly often, then you're probably not learning. And so we've learned a lot in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, that's powerful.
So I guess to say, building on what you said, Jeff, I think what we have also found with failure, and I think you put this really well, is in order to share and learn from your failures, you need to you need to have those strong relationships in place already so that communication is happening and that clients feel comfortable sharing those things, so that we can support them and help address failures as they happen, and they do happen. I think that there's been stories of CAWST staff going into the field and seeing biosand filters that have been turned into flower pots, for example. So, it happens. Things break down. Uptake doesn't happen for many different reasons. And so, as you said, the important thing is learning from it and communicating it, and the core to that is relationships. And I think I was thinking about this question quite a bit, and what the thought that occurred to me was that failures happen also in every engineered system, including household water treatment and piped supplies. Like, there's failures that happen in our own taps here and back home. So I think the important thing is to design for it and to keep that in mind with the implementation of it, and to monitor and have follow-up to those contexts, and that mitigates it, because it's not like failure is never going to happen. It happens in every engineered system has failure. Yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's lovely.
I would add that obviously in R&D we have failures all of the time, and the majority of our projects don't actually become fruitful. So we're well used to failure, and but around projects, and it's something obviously we've focused a lot more on in the last 12 months, is trying to get trials and the product underground. So for us, especially in R&D, it's about trying to get that quality monitoring of the water, trying to understand what's happening at the household, and our biggest challenge has been we've probably tried to buy too much than we could actually manage at the beginning. So our scope was too wide. We didn't have enough finance. We didn't have someone on the ground like a champion who could manage and report back to us and get the actual information. So while it was running and while it was gathering the data, we may not get every bit of that. And when you're trying to put that whole piece together, that's really, really difficult and challenging. I know from conversations with others in the space of R&D across the world, and many other companies, that it's really, really difficult to set up trials in the field. And for us, it's even more difficult because of the rural HWTS situation that we're talking about. It's even more challenging. We may not have internet, we may not have infrastructure. There's been a number of different projects where we've tried to set up treatment systems for schools, and just understanding, or even trying to get the information of understanding of, well, are they collecting the water off the roof? Do they have pipes? Do they have a tank? Have we to try and get a tank? So all of that is really, really difficult, and that's what we're trying to do. A couple of the learnings is kind of what I said at the start. We've kind of set out now at the beginning what we really want to achieve. We narrow down exactly, okay, we're going to look for E. coli, we're going to look for free chlorine. We're going to set up and collaborate and partner with someone else that can actually maybe add filters, that can do something else to the system that allows us to have the full and get all that information back, that we can actually make something substantial, that obviously then we get that story together of show the product working, the impact that it's having, not just on the water, but also on the students or the families that the product is at. So whether that's, again, diarrhea, whether it's sickness, something a little less intangible than data, again, that's what we're trying to achieve now. Yeah, and that's where I guess our goals with future projects in the HWTS space is.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely relate to that. Just a quick note from the moderator. If you're a student out there and you're watching, maybe doing research in a lab, I spent 2 years of my PhD doing specific experiments trying to combine silver and copper into a tablet for slow, gradual release over 24 hours. And it never worked. I spent 2 years doing that, and I had to pivot. And eventually I did find a solution that wasn't at all what I originally thought it was going to be. And yeah, it's all about pivoting constantly. And I didn't realize going into academia and research how much of it is you spend 2 years doing an experiment, and the results is, oh, it doesn't work. So yeah, just encouragement to anyone in academia out there, or research, or any work you're doing. It is not wasted, for sure. So, Nikki, I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, and following up on what you said around laboratories, a lesson learned with the WHO scheme was in round one, we were very open to reviewing existing data to maybe reduce the testing that need to be done under the scheme. And The lesson learned there is, you received a lot of different levels of transparency in how things were evaluated. A lot of times there was lacking QC information. Just in terms of robustness, were things like the continuum of potential quality of source water that's going to be used considered in the evaluation, were the surrogates appropriate and going to be adequately protective. And I guess, so there, the real thing that's the lesson learned was, okay, it's not going to be that easy for us to use existing data, and it's good we have these prescriptive protocols available and out for folks who are looking to do some testing down the road. But the real danger there is that when, a lot of testing, when it's not, a lot of these approaches to testings can often end in overstatement of performance, and so that's not protective, right? So that was a lesson we learned early on, was like, okay, we thought we were going to be able to use a lot of this existing data and compare it to these protocols that we put together that were quite rigorous, and create still that level playing field for folks who were submitting to the scheme, and that wasn't the case, so it kind of changed how we had to move into round 2 with existing data and creating checklists for being able to vet this kind of data. So that was a lesson learned, because I don't have a field experience.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to add to that and come back to what you were talking about. Failure is expected. I mean, I think a lot in this sector when we talk about failure of HWTS, and we talk about failure systems and pivoting and learning from those things, to recognize that failure is going to happen. I mean, there's been lots of conversations around the piping systems and those things, and there's a lot of failure and water waste and those kind of things, and there's repairs and there's ways to fix that. In HWTS, we have to recognize that there's failures, and it's been enjoyable from the beginning to go to where we are and what solutions were there 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and today, and see the innovation that's coming along, but knowing that in the different contexts, those are failures. I mean, for us, one of the big ones on the marketing side and the market-driven, kind of approach side is oftentimes those distributors are really distracted by the dollars. An NGO can come along and buy 1,000 filters, or a government can go and implement 20,000 filters, and those are great to chase. But that direct-to-consumer, that model of going into the communities that can afford it, or even partnering with NGOs in creative ways, not to just drop product, which then detracts from the market. So, and we've seen a lot of those failures. I mean, we all know the stories of Haiti, and back in 2010, when there's just everyone. It's really hard to sell a filter in Haiti, let alone a lot of other issues now and a lot of other failures. But to see those failures and recognize that failure is part of the process in every part of that holistic view, and how do we pivot in that, and because it's a reality that we're still all progressing forward.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear that. I think that's really encouraging for all of us doing work, that we are bound to fail, but we will learn from them. Fantastic. I did want to direct this question for you first, Nikki, because you did touch on the labeling earlier, and testing and overstatement and all of the work that you've done. How can we better evaluate household water treatment for long-term success? I'll just leave it at that.
Great, thank you. Glad to take this question. I mean, I think coming from the WHO scheme, let's look to have products out there that work, that have been demonstrated to work. And I know that initially with the scheme that's talking about a laboratory evaluation, there's more to it to know if it's going to work in the community. But as a really good start, let's make sure that we are having things move in communities that have actually been demonstrated to work. And I'm a strong proponent of the work that's been put into the WHO scheme protocols and the efforts to adapt those protocols for country context with respect to what capabilities are in country, and there's work to do that, and so there can still be some really good, robust evaluations in countries, even if they're maybe not quite yet at all that's involved in the WHO scheme, which, as many of you know, was being performed in 2 laboratories globally at the time. But I think the The other two things is for success, and these are two things that the scheme is really passionate about, is one, options. And I believe, Jeff, someone down here touched on it. Options are important for folks to have. Different technologies, different modes of operation, different price points. Options are important, as well as consistent and correct use. And that's really, really critical. Again, that's not something evaluated under the scheme, but that's something that we always wanted to make sure we spoke to, was the fact that, yes, we've evaluated it can perform in the lab and yada, yada, but like what's also very, very important, that these things be used correctly and consistently.
I'm going to jump on that and pick on Nikki for a minute, because we've talked a bunch about this on the scheme side, because it's funny from the marketing side, and we've really enjoyed being able to have more regulatory, being able to have a scheme like that, because it's really important, because there's so many technologies, to know what's a quality thing that's R&D has gone behind, and what is just a replication of something else that's not really up to standard or up to snuff in the market. But being able to leverage that knowledge base, to leverage that kind of thing in a marketing way, in an awareness group, to be able to share those kind of things out in the capacity raising in the community, so the community knows what to choose. It's really easy for manufacturers at times to just come in and here's a bunch of product, and to really do the education side and be able to. This is my picking on Nikki, be able to go, hey, these are certified by WHO, and the balance of, they're not endorsements, but there's a qualification that says these are what you would want in the community, and sometimes that's why there's a price point attached to it. Sometimes that's why groups will use them and implement them, and why they choose ones and not others. And I think it's really important. A scheme like that is really important. But then how do we market that and have the community know about that, have the governments know about that as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Camille. I was going to point, maybe I had a follow-up for Jeff, and then I would love to hear your thoughts too, but as an implementer, Jeff, when you're hearing about all of this evaluation of household water treatment, what does that mean for you on your end? How are you evaluating success with actual implementation, and what does third-party certification mean for you in the field working with actual households?
So I'm going to speak to my context,
Yeah,
okay? And I'll
sure.
speak specifically to where we work in Honduras. A couple of things that are key for us. Nikki, I appreciate that you mentioned follow-up. Follow-up, 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 follow-up. I mean, you can't, you literally cannot do that too much. And so we actually have built into our system where we do a 2-week follow-up, an 8-week follow-up, and a 1-year follow-up minimum. Like that is agreed upon.
Yeah.
The other part of that is we never do mass distribution. And keep in mind, because for anybody out there that does mass distribution, I'm not naysaying you. I'm just simply saying in our context, we never do mass distribution. We literally go home by home. And we make sure that that home, that family, and I keep saying mom because in our context, a lot of times it's mom that's there, right? Or the abuela that's there, the grandmother. And we make sure that they understand how this system works. It's super easy, but we make sure that they understand. And by us going back 2 weeks, 8 weeks, a year later minimum, if the system in which we have implemented there is not working correctly, we can say, hey, let's revisit that. And why isn't it? Just simply needs to be backwashed a little more, cleaned a little bit more, those type of things. The other thing is this, and we just started doing this about 2.5 years ago. We started using GIS, and we're literally tracking every home, every system. We know we can follow that family even through their health journey and through their financial journey, and we're hoping that less days are missed of work and more children are going to school because they no longer have to worry about stomach-borne illness. But we can also be able to look at an entire community at one time. We also, for us personally, we know where we have been and where we have not been. We're huge proponents of Man, I wish all of us could get on some form of a generalized map to know who's working where, doing what, when they have implemented it, and on what date. You know, we all want everybody to have clean water, but we all also want to be intentional and not waste our time, or waste the other person or the other organization's time. And so, but I would say, if nothing else, I would say implement, follow up, follow up, follow up.
Yeah, completely. Thank you. Yeah, Camille, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked this question, because this was like at the root of my PhD initially, so I'm very jazzed. Yeah, so I really like to build on what Nikki said, so correct and consistent use, which is key. And I think we have come a long way from only evaluating HWTS technologies based on log reduction values in the lab, which is great and is certainly needed. But I think there's also like correct and consistent use to use. I think somebody used an iceberg metaphor earlier this week that I'm going to borrow. So it's like the tip of the iceberg, and below that you have things like affordability and supply chain constraints and things like labor burden. And Jeff, you mentioned that it's usually like mom or abuela operating and treating the water, and it's the labor burden is very gendered usually. Things like user acceptance, like do they like using the filter or the chlorine tablets or whatever, what have you. Yeah, like provision of safe storage. There's just so many things that go into it, and those all could be evaluated. Those are all dimensions that we can look at. But I think, as you said, like the important thing is to keep track of it and to evaluate those things, because it's more than just dropping a filter off and expecting it to work. There's things like training and awareness building and all that kind of thing, and community support to go into that correct and consistent use. So yeah, I'm glad you asked the question.
Yeah. No, I love that. Your research was specifically looking at this with some products, so that is really cool. And Tom, I know you're coming from the research and development side, but maybe on your end in the lab, how are ways that evaluation of the product are incorporated?
It's funny because I agree absolutely with the four of us that in everything that we're saying, it always comes back to quality, to what you said, Nikki. Again, this week I've had conversations about, again, our products being used not in the right way. For whatever reason that is, that's again a challenge for us to go and understand that and find why. It was a fantastic study where they were giving out AquaTabs alongside a couple of other pieces of equipment to help control and prevent cholera spreading. And all of a sudden, when they went back after, as you said, Jeff, they were going back to understand, to do the retraining, and they test the water samples. They're seeing that they're not using the tablets for drinking water. They're using it for various other reasons, which for me it's a real disappointment that we're obviously missing something along the line that we need to understand better, so that we get the correct use, so that we get the safety and the efficacy correct, so that they can actually, because the ultimate goal from all of us here and everyone at the conference is clean drinking water for someone at the household. So that's a huge challenge that we obviously need to understand more. The other thing that again you had said, Jeremy, was around the people on the ground need to be able to form some sort of a little business, so it has to be sustainable. And with that, then it's again back to us, and it's about training. Again, we're a manufacturer, yes, but there's so much responsibility on us to be able to educate our people within Kersia, within Medentech, but also educate our customers, to educate the end users. And my team and we've had those conversations many times. And again, it comes back to even those projects failing. That's potentially one of the key reasons why they fail, is we've said, well, we've done our training, we've done our bit, and ultimately not done that follow up that it needs to be more, do you know, and that's really, really important. So.
I'm going to jump in really fast and say anybody watching looking for studies, that's one of the things is to see that line and get in the field and the follow-up stuff because it really does inform the manufacturers. I get asked constantly by all the manufacturers of, can you give us some field input? Can you give us some field feedback on this? We want to iterate. We want to do it differently. We want to do it better. And that's the cool part about the manufacturers heavily invested in making a good product in HWTS. At the same time, everyone along that chain is really invested in making a difference. And so if you want a project, all you
100% on that, and I'll pass it over, Jeff. But like that's huge. Like we often don't know that these challenges are being faced on the ground. And it's key for us to get that feedback because that leads us to more insights to understand that, well, actually we need to do something on we need to be more innovative on the distribution side. We need to be more innovative on the labeling and understand that, okay, there's some sort of challenge that we're not getting through to the end user. And it's a huge challenge.
Just want to say one more thing, that community buy-in is key. It doesn't matter what we think is the best solution. If on the ground, community buy-in is not there, you're spinning your wheels, you're wasting time, you're wasting resources. And so in our context, we will, first of all, we don't go into community that we're not invited into. Secondly is we have a pre-meeting. We make sure that the water council, the community council, that they're all there and they understand how everything works and what our expectations are for this whole thing. We make sure they understand that we're coming back multiple times and that's got to be okay. On the day of distribution, in our context, we expect that a certain percentage of the community will be there to help. And I'll just throw this out there, and there's another community on the list after yours, and we expect that a certain percentage of your community will come and help do distribution in the next community and just all those type of things. But the beautiful thing is when, like in our context, when we do an entire community at one time, then there's that peer influence, right? So like if I'm having an issue with my water solution, right, I can just go to my neighbor because my neighbor has the very same thing, and I say, all of a sudden my filter is not working correctly, and I can't quite remember what the solution was. And that other mom can say, oh, you're just not back flushing it enough, or you're just not this, or you're just not that, right? They can really help. So the peer influence from the community is huge.
Yeah, that social support when adopting a new behavior, a new technology that's huge. And it did remind me too of, you mentioned follow-up earlier, and then when Tom was talking about designing, it made me think I would love to see more collaboration between academia, research, and the nonprofits boots on the ground too, because in different studies that I was a part of, we would have the funding for going to test the filters for maybe a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and then our funding ran out and we had to leave. And then there are some trained up people there, but we don't have the funding to then be following up with them, going back on the ground every year after year. We might visit in a couple of years. And so I think that partnership between, including that in the budget, I guess, going forward would be definitely a priority. But then partnering with nonprofits who are then getting funding from fundraisers and donors, and then academia, we're getting it from grants and other donors probably, and all of that I think could be a cool collaboration. So, not to take it over, but well, thanks guys. I do have another question that I'll give a little background for before I ask it. Was a lot of the reason, the motivation of this panel in its entirety was because a couple of us last year at the conference would hear whispers of conversations after side events and in between sessions of debate, you could say, of efforts towards piped water or efforts towards decentralized household water treatment, point of use filters, treatment. I heard at least some debate between those. And the moral of the story is it's not just one or the other, but I do want to hear more from the panel too and from audience members as a whole. What are some of the pros and cons, which I say that lightly, but what are some pros and cons of putting our efforts towards these decentralized efforts versus more working as a whole country, government, towards piped systems for the houses? So we wanted a space to be able to debate that, discuss that, and get all of our thoughts out on the table. So I would love to open it up to you all. Whoever wants to go first. I think Camille, you'd love to go first.
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked the question because I wasn't at UNC last year, but that has come up quite a bit this week as well. And for sure, like at CAWST, of course, if the community has assessed and is putting in a centralized piped water system and that system is working for them and it's distributing safe water, like that's great, like totally thumbs up, support that. However, I guess I'll start by saying that this decentralized, centralized, I don't know, debate it's a strange word. It's just such a false dichotomy in my mind. There's so many contexts where there is a centralized supply, where household water treatment is still used and still needs to be used for there to be that end protection to the user. So it's strange. Like I think that we would find that the majority of systems in the global south are hybrid in nature, and that this dichotomy is not really the case. Like for example, intermittent water supply, where households are storing larger volumes of water to compensate for the intermittent access. There's recontamination that happens there, or that often happens there, and that needs to be, or it should be treated to protect against that. And if the piped water supply is not trustworthy or not working some of the time, or contaminated some of the time, I mean, this happens in the global north too. I mean, it happens everywhere. So there's many contexts where HWTS is used with piped water supplies. So I guess I just want to, I don't know if there is a debate.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Can I pop on from that?
For sure.
No, I love that. I love that because, emerging contaminants comes to mind too. Here, my experience in the States as well, right? We find these things, we develop criteria, but it takes years to implement strategies at the distribution point, So I think that's great. And generally speaking from WHO, we recognize that household water treatment is a fabulous interim solution for reducing burden of disease in a community where there's like an untreated or unreliable source water. And isn't that great, as we all look towards the ultimate goal of universal access to safe and reliable supplies. So I think that's great. The only one, thing that I do want to mention is that household water treatment does put oversight of those supplies on the household. So that's a bit of a, that's something to consider as, I don't want to say burden so much, but that's where that sits in terms of making sure they keep that safe once it's treated, and that they're using appropriate treatment methods for their particular source water quality concerns.
Yeah, and I was going to echo that too, because I think the conflict or whatever we call that, which is funny because we do talk about that way, but I think part of it is some of that pivoting that we, even within HWTS, we pivot to different solutions. There's been this pivot from well-meaning humanitarians for many, many years go in without government, without the water community, without the community actually talking to them. And so there's this response, which I think is a really healthy response in the sector that says, hey, that's not right. We need to talk to the water committee. We need to talk to the community. We need to come alongside of governments. You know, what WHO has done to come alongside and inform on the regulatory side of government, that's extremely important. And so, and of course, then that comes with, you know, much more, that's a horrible term, but just the pipe systems, the systems that truly a real stakeholder of government can come in and bring to bear, and the SDG 30s and everything else that is there, and that's a wonderful bring to bear, you know, reality and goals. And so there's been this big pivot that way that seems to be in conflict with HWTS, but I think that's where the partnership of the two, allowing them to pivot, because there's some really good things out of there that says we got to talk to communities. We can't just come in and drop filters, or you know, we can't just come in and, you know, implement, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of things because we get carbon credits. We can't do that anymore. But where is the place that we do belong, and things are broken on that side, and you know there's failures on both. And so I love the part where it isn't conflict. It's letting them I mean, it's them and us again. I actually use the term myself. So, but it's one sector saying, if there's pivot there to a failure in HWTS, that's healthy for them to pivot there, and then it's healthy for us to pivot into that and say, how do we complement that along the way? And so I think that's, you know, that complementing versus conflict is really important. If Jeff was just out there dumping filters, we should probably responsibly say, what are you doing? You know, but he's not, and that's been a great, you know, move in the sector. So. Yeah, I love the question.
Yeah. Thank you.
So there is no conflict.
Yeah.
And I know, and I don't mean to speak on behalf of all of us on the ground, because I wouldn't dare do that.
You're representing.
But I will say this: there is no conflict. Let's get clean water to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. If I thought tomorrow that we could get safe, clean drinking water via solely pipes, rock on, I would pivot and do that. Now, our home community, we get our water from the mountains, comes down these giant pipes, comes into 2 giant water cisterns. That water is then supposed to be treated. I'm not convinced it is, but even if it is, which I hope it is, well, then it's going to come down to a split, and then it's going to split off to, and our home community is roughly about 560 homes. And it's going to come to a split, and then from that split, it's going to go to half the community and half the community. And then it's going to go to the individual houses. If it were solely piped, and it were treated at the source, and all of those lines were underground, and the water was consistent, then great. And if for anybody who has traveled, especially in the mountains anywhere in the world, it's pretty difficult to get those water lines underneath the ground. And so if a new struggling family moves into the community and they build their home, and a water line is close, what are they going to do? They got to have water, right? And so they're going to cut that line to split into it. Every time somebody cuts into that line, potential contamination. Every time we run out of water and they got to reboot the system, you know, so from our standpoint, there is no debate. Let's just get clean water to somebody and everybody.
Yeah, I love that.
The last thing to add from my side for this question is something I don't think none of us really specialize in here, but for emergency settings, that's like, household is maybe sometimes the wrong word, but it's point of use water treatment. It just needs to be what it is, and that's not the case for piped water supply. So that's a huge application of small scale household or point of use water treatment. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that. I mean, even what we're seeing here. I mean, Jeff is on the ground doing it. We've seen other partners. We see, even from a market-driven approach, you know, consumers in the U.S. that can consume, that can order on Amazon and have it delivered, at least to their community, maybe. You know, there is an awareness in the U.S. around HWTS in that sense that says, well, I know I've got to have safe water. I know that I need that. And so there's that consumer model that's already here really naturally, and we see that spike in emergencies. So how do we make it, and we do that in the US because we make it readily available. It's, anybody can purchase, but how do we not even necessarily pre-position, but make it accessible where there's areas that we know that's going to be a continual need here and there? How do we make it accessible so when those times come, it is accessible? HWTS is a real value in emergency relief.
Sorry, since we brought this up.
Yeah.
So since Jeremy brought it up, we'll blame it on him. So I, like many, have been in Western North Carolina doing water filtration distribution. And this hurricane, I don't know what we're going to call it, because I live in the upstate of South Carolina, and it came through there as well. It's something that we literally never get. We can't say that now, right? But like Jeremy says, this hurricane was an equalizer. I literally saw the same thing in Swannanoa that I have seen in Honduras and around the world. And they didn't have water for a while. Some are starting to get it back, but there's a boil advisory, and there's just all these things, right? I went by one distribution site. They had these great big plastic containers of water, which is awesome. It's all supposed to be potable and clean and all those type of things. But somebody the night before had left the top off. Well, now you're not potable. It's just not. And so we ended up dropping off, 5 simple systems there. They were super thankful. So I appreciate you bringing that up because, yeah, this has been brought to the forefront in our area right here in North Carolina and South Carolina. We need to be a little better prepared. And if we only had piped, we'd be out of luck.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. That is a very stark reminder of, we are not free from that anywhere in the world, that we should be prepared wherever we are. And I do need to wrap us up now, but if anyone has any questions for the panelists, feel free. I think Hank over here. Darren has a mic for you. We have time for a couple questions before we wrap up for the day.
Henk Holtslag. I have a question for Jeff. I understand you go house by house to explain the filters, and then you sell the filters, or they pay for it?
No, sir. We have donors, and
Okay.
they fund everything.
Yeah.
So
very good.
we go home by home doing it that way.
And the next question is, do you buy the filters yourself, or you buy them in a local shop?
So we buy them in country, in Honduras.
You buy them in the country, so you help to build up. My point was, if you buy in bulk and you disseminate filters, you don't build up the supply chain, but you help the supply chain, I understand. So you buy them in Honduras. That's
Yes,
what
sir.
you say? Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Very good.
Thank you. Marcio.
Hi, first of all, congratulations for the panel. It's amazing to see HWTS point of views, solutions being discussed. So thanks to all. My name is Marcio Boto. I'm from Virawater. So my question is, we talked about follow-up, surveillance, which is really important. But I want to ask, might be like a gap before the follow-up, before the implementing. How the implementers, what are the tools available to select the most appropriate solution? Since someone, I think it was Jeff and Tom, said that there are so many options there. There are so many possibilities of products and this and that. And not just talking about the target contaminant, but also looking at accessibility, other criteria that might be also very important in the process of selection of the most appropriate product. And also for the follow-up itself, what are the tools, what are the approach available to also help the implementers and whoever is working with point of view solutions to evaluate that the products have been used by the end users correctly and consistently? Because sometimes it's so easy, you need to use it correctly, consistently. Yeah, but how do you actually evaluate that? Is it only by water quality test methods? And what are the options? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Camille.
Okay, so to answer your first question on how to select the best household water treatment option, on CAWST side, we have the largest online library of WASH resources. So we have fact sheets and training modules on household water treatment and storage. So anybody who's trying to select an option can go to our website and learn more about each type of treatment. And as well, we have a consulting support team who are happy to answer questions, and a region-specific team each for Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So they're happy to work with implementers who are trying to select the best option. So we have that. And then to answer the second part of your question, Marcio, for evaluating, so we are developing a sanitary inspection form, so an inspection form that implementers can use at the household level to examine, for example, for a biosand filter, if it's checking to see if it's cracked, or checking to see if it's exposed to weather, or checking to see if the flow rate is correct. So there is that implementation check. So we are working on rolling that out, because you're right, Marcio, like the implementation and the monitoring, we say like, oh, check up and monitoring, but there's a lot that goes into it, and it's not necessarily obvious what to look for, even for those implementers who do have a lot of experience. So we're working on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll go on your second question as well, because I think that that monitoring, following up with questions. I mean, Jeff, you mentioned the GIS system, and there's some really good systems out there that. What the hope is that more implementers, more distributors that are selling that follow up can enter into that space and answer more of those questions. You know, uptake of an HWTS solution, how well is that uptake, things like that. And so I think there's, hopefully we continue to see those kind of things. I mean, yeah, Business Connect, we're doing the same thing, and we link with CAWST all the time, and I think it's a lot of fun. And with WHO on the scheme side, to really, there's some really good resources around knowledge hubs that are out there. Multiple groups have really good knowledge hubs, you know, to link those together. You know, solutions that to look through those databases. Yeah, it's a neat time in the digital space where you're really able to see some really good resources between, you know, Business Connect for Water, CAWST, WHO's, you know, scheme in the database. I mean, there's some really good resources out there which are really developing.
I'll happily answer the first question, but I'm joking. But on the water quality side, I think you also have to look at, so every area is completely different. So when we're setting up trials and speaking to the end user, like obviously we can put online sensors that cost $2,000. It's not practical, obviously. So it's really, really important to keep it, I would say, simple to what you need and what's relevant to your local area. So like if you know that there's going to be high flow rates and floods, for instance, it may be just simple enough to do E. coli testing, total coliforms. Maybe if you do have like disinfection, you want to measure that parameter, ORP. Do you know what? Those parameters will really, really help you kind of get a base understanding, and then once you've gotten more and more learnings and knowledge of what's actually happening, you might want to improve it then further.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll let Jeff speak, and then we do need to wrap up. Or a couple. No. Yeah, Jeff.
Okay, real quick to your second part. With the mapping, we have a whole survey. And so I can stand before you today and say that in Honduras, across all of our communities, we're seeing an 84.6% drop in reported cases of diarrhea. There's no way I could say that unless we were literally doing our follow-ups using the exact same survey. And so it's super intentional. It's quite a bit more work, but we feel like it's the right thing to do on behalf of the communities.
Thank you. Lovely. I appreciate all of your input, all of your feedback, all of your perspectives are really, really helpful, not only for me to learn. I'm also a young professional in this space, so I'm still learning a lot. So thank you all for being here today. Let's give the panelists a round of applause. that concludes this session. Please find us at the Business Connect booth if you want to ask any more questions, or we can connect you to any of the panelists here. Thank you so much.